afternoon. Welcome to Reentry Against the Odds, a segment about registrants. My name is Mary Weaver. I started at Friends Outside Los Angeles in 1988 and became the director in 1990. During that time, through about 2015, the United States became the #1 country in the world per capita for incarcerating people. That included countries such as the Soviet Union when it existed and South Africa during apartheid. This was due to tough on crime laws, such as 3 strikes, the war on drugs, and other factors such as Willie Horton, whose case brought down the presidential campaign of Michael Dukakis. I remember those days vividly. It seemed as though there was a new prison being built almost every 6 months. Fortunately, around 2018 or so, tough on crime legislation began to be replaced by smart on crime legislation, such as here in California, Prop 47, through which prisoners were able to be released earlier. And some prisons have even closed. Unfortunately, however, a relatively small subset of the incarcerated was largely left behind with these reforms. And that subset was registrants, who are also known as sex offenders. Registrants were excluded from consideration from some of the new laws that were passed. Research about them has remained sparse and difficult to access. And worst of all, the myths and stigma about them looms large over them. About 20 years ago or so, a parole agent in Pasadena told me a story that I've never forgotten. She was a Black parole agent, and that is significant. She said to me, Mary, I used to supervise a Black man who had gone to Glendale with his friends to have some drinks. At the time, Glendale was a community in which had a reputation for not particularly being welcoming to persons of color. He was leaving the bar with his friends at closing time, forgetting to use the bathroom, so he went to the alley and urinated. He was arrested and convicted of indecent exposure. He became a sex offender. He had to carry that label and had to register for life on the state's registry. That seemed wrong to me. And at that time, I just knew one day there was going to be a time when we would have a chance to create a program for registrants here at Friends Outside. And that day came about 3 years ago. My colleague, Dr. Luis Barrera Castañon, and I were discussing the California Workforce Development Board's accelerator funding opportunity through which marginalized individuals could get assistance to accelerate their employment. I knew this was the day I had hoped for so many years ago. This is our second accelerator project. Both projects have 2 principal components, research and a pilot program. The research is intended to demythologize registrants through learning and public education. The pilot program is for us to learn more about how to effectively serve job-seeking registrants. Both projects have culminated in a public summit to share what we have learned. Today, you will hear from one of our nation's experts on registrants, Janice Bellucci, whose law practice is devoted entirely to registrants. Ms. Bellucci will be followed by a registrant panel, during which you will hear directly from these individuals about their needs, their challenges, and how to best serve them. On Thursday, you will hear from our researchers, Dr. Castañon and his assistant, Dr. Murillo, about the findings that they have made during the project. The summit will then close out with a presentation by the Ahimsa Collective, a program which works to respond to harm in ways that fosters wholeness for everyone. But before I go, I want to give a big shout out to each of you who attended our session today. One of the challenges about improving the prospects for registrants is that sometimes people do not want to even hear about them or talk about them or learn about them. So I really give you big commendations for taking the time to learn and to be open-minded to the information we're going to be providing to you. I hope you will be glad you joined us, and we'll see you on Thursday. Thank you.
Good afternoon. I'm Joe Flores from the California Workforce Development Board, and I oversee reentry initiatives and programs for the state board. And I want to thank Friends Outside Los Angeles County for providing the space for me to talk to you all today. And I also want to acknowledge their works that is addressing your needs. It's very important for an agency like mine to provide resources and funds to organizations that is dedicated to serve the often hardest to serve. We cannot do this reentry work alone. I'm very fortunate to hear all the success stories out in the reentry field, whether it's a person who just received an offer of employment right before leaving state prison, or another who just went to a job center to receive supportive services they qualified for to secure that life-changing job. It's important to let you all know that there are many people rooting for you and your success by changing the language and removing barriers to employment so you don't go back. And I want to thank Friends Outside Los Angeles County for doing what it takes for you to have a successful journey. Thank you.
Thank you to Mary Weaver, the Executive Director of Friends Outside Los Angeles County, for your leadership and vision in this project and for the continued work to support registrant communities. Also, thank you to Joe Flores with the state's Workforce Development Board. Thank you for your generous support of this project. This is, in the last 4 years, has been the only project sort of funded to support this population, this registrant population. So we're very thankful for their support in this very complex topic. But I also wanted to say that this is important work, that this is a population that has unique experiences, unique challenges, unique opportunities. And so we're really thankful for all of you that are attending today. This is a very complex issue. It's a very complex topic, and so we understand that. But we really do thank you for your willingness to want to learn, to expand your knowledge, and to share that knowledge with others. And so thank you all for attending today. My name is Dr. Luis Barrera Castañón. I'm one of the researchers on this project and have been doing this work for the last 4 years in support of the registrant population. And so we, throughout this presentation, through these next 2 days, today and on Thursday, you will hear the term registrant being used to describe this population. This is a person-centered term that we've adopted, and otherwise this population is known as sex offenders or registered sex offenders. There's also 290s that they're known by as well. But again, we've adopted the registrant term. So in our reports, in the documents that we publish, as well as going through these next couple of days, you will hear that term registrant being used. So also, there is a Q&A box at the Zoom here that you can ask any questions of the panelists, of anyone that's attending to that, or just in general, any questions that you might have around this registrant population. We're not lawyers, so if there's any specific law-related topics, we definitely defer that to lawyers. Again, we'll try to answer the best that we can. We will send up a follow-up email with all that information, but please submit your answers, submit your questions that you might have so that we can provide answers to those questions. So thank you again for attending, and it is my pleasure to introduce our content expert, Janice Bellucci. Janice is the founder and executive director of ACSL. That's the Alliance for Constitutional Sex Offense Laws, and they are really a leader in this space. Janice has been doing this work for a long time. She's a civil rights attorney, and she has been recognized as one of California's top 100 influential lawyers. So we hope that you learn a lot, and we'll see you after the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction. Everyone, my name is Janice Bellucci. I am an attorney, and I am also executive director of the Alliance for Constitutional Sex Offense Laws. My current legal practice is limited to representing people who are required to register, as well as members of their families. I wish it were a smaller group. Unfortunately, in the state of California, it's over 100,000 families. Today, I'll be talking about really the basics of registration, including who's on the registry, why they're on the registry, and how some of them, but not all of them, are now eligible to petition for removal from the registry. And finally, I'm going to be asking you to help those who are on the registry. There has been a sex offender registry in the state of California for more than 70 years. The sex offender registry, in fact, started here in California in the year 1947. And in the year 1947, the city of Los Angeles decided that they wanted to track gay men. That's the only people they were tracking. And this is the only location in the state where it took place, again, in the year 1947. The tracking of gay men in the city of Los Angeles was pervasive, and in fact included a colleague of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. His name is Bayard Rustin, and Mr. Rustin, unfortunately, was having gay sex in a car when in fact the police found him and his partner. And in 1947, approximately, Mr. Rustin was added to the sex offender registry in the city of Los Angeles. Unfortunately, since that time, since 1947, the registry has grown dramatically. It's grown geographically, and it's also grown in the number and types of sex offenses. So again, from the city of Los Angeles, it expanded to the county of Los Angeles, and from the county of Los Angeles, it was like a cancer growing throughout our state, including at the time that this registry began. That registry, in fact, required people to register for a lifetime. The registry itself is based on several myths, and I'm going to talk about those myths, but I'm also going to debunk the myths one by one. This is really important information, and I hope that you will listen to what I have to say and remember what I have to say. The first myth is that people on the registry will always do it again. We've heard that over and over again. We've heard it in the media. Perhaps you've heard it, in your family. Perhaps you've heard it on, seen it on a billboard, for heaven's sakes. But the fact is, this is not true. It's a myth. So I say that, and I can speak authoritatively about this, because the fact is that the rate of reoffense, and what I mean by reoffense is a person committing another sex offense, is actually less than 1% while that person is on parole. And as you'll find out in a few slides from now, that in fact, parole can last up to 20 years. So again, the rate of reoffense is less than 1%, by the way, while on parole. When you look at a person's overall rate of reoffense, the fact is that that rate of reoffense is only about 5%. So put another way, 95% of the people on parole or on the sex offender registry will not commit another sex offense. And I'm being really careful in my language here, and I'm talking about the reoffense rate, because supposedly that's what everybody's worried about. Supposedly they're worried about people who are in fact are going to abuse a child or even an adult. And so that's the reoffense rate. But there is another rate out there that some people refer to, and it's very different. It's the recidivism rate. So many times a person required to register who's on parole will in fact be returned to custody. But most of the time it's jail. Most of the time it's for 30 days, and almost always it's due to a parole condition. And I'll be talking about some parole conditions that will probably surprise you. They might even shock you in just a few slides from now. Here's another myth, that they can't be cured. So what they're talking about is people on the registry. Again, they'll always do it again, and there's no way to prevent them from doing it again. Well, this myth is just as nonsensical as the first myth. And so why am I saying that? I'm saying it because there is very effective counseling and treatment programs that are available to people on the registry to prevent them from reoffending. And then for the folks who have been studying reoffense rates for decades now, this is what they've concluded after more than 30 years of research, that people in the community, if they haven't reoffended within 17 years, they're not going to reoffend. And where have you heard that? These are the facts, folks. Dr. Carl Hansen, who is the international expert on reoffense rates, he is the one, after decades of research, has figured out that if a registrant is in the community for 17 years, and what I mean by in the community, by the way, just means they're not in custody, they're not in jail or prison. So if they're in the community for 17 years and they haven't reoffended, they're not going to reoffend. And here's another factor that people don't talk about, and that is registrants aging out. So for most people on the registry after the age of 50, guess what? The reoffense rate is even lower than 5%. So, and when you get age 60, 70 and above, and we do have registrants who are 50, 60 and 70 years old, then the fact is they're going to age out. And quite frankly, they're not likely at all to reoffend. Here's another myth, that the registry protects families. There's one of our board members who in fact looked at the registry when she was going to decide about where their family was going to move. And at the time when Jessica's law was in effect, and Jessica's law, thank goodness, is no longer a requirement, but Jessica's law said you can't live near a park or a school. So she decided that in order to protect her family, that they should move close to both a school and a park, right? And that's what they did. So they moved from home A to home B near a school and a park. And then she thought, wow, my family's going to be safe. Well, that's not what happened at all. What happened is a member of the family, in fact, sexually abused another member of the family. And she was caught totally unaware. By the way, it had been going on for a couple of years before she found out about it, because she wasn't looking inside the family. She was only looking outside the family. She was looking at the people who are on the registry. And that gave her and her family a false sense of security, which is, as long as I don't live near somebody who's on the registry, my family will be safe. That's not true at all. So let's talk about who is it then that sexually abused children. Okay, they're not on the registry. The people who normally sexually abuse a child are indeed members of the family, unfortunately teachers, coaches, clergy, and even police officers. So folks, these are the people that you need to be on the lookout for. And if you have, let's say you have the soccer coach who says, hey, why don't I take care of your son, Johnny, or your daughter, Dorothy, for the weekend? Well, I hope you will think twice about that, because unfortunately, that soccer coach is much more likely to harm your child than somebody who is in fact a stranger. All right, here is another one, another myth, that people who view child pornography will molest children. Not true. People who look at child pornography do it for many reasons. Some of them are teenagers, by the way, who are questioning their own sexuality, and they're wondering if in fact they are interested in females or interested in males, and they will in fact go on to online, like so many people do, especially kids who don't want to ask their parents for information about this. They will go online and look at photos. And if you look at a photo, anybody, by the way, looks at a photo of a person under the age of 18, and we do start with age 17 and below. If you're looking at a picture of somebody who is 17 or younger, then in fact that falls in the category of child pornography. And by the way, you don't even have to look at the photograph or the video, because unfortunately this is a strict liability offense. So if you possess on your computer a photograph of a child, again, somebody 17 or younger, that in fact is considered to be child pornography. And that in fact, you will end up on the sex offender registry and be convicted of child pornography, possession of child pornography. And again, you don't even have to know it's on your computer. Somebody could have sent it to you either innocently or on purpose to really infect your computer. And unfortunately, those images, most of them anyway, have cookies on them. And the fact is, that's how law enforcement finds out that you in fact have a photo, an image on your computer, that is indeed child pornography. And by the way, again, the people who are viewing this called child pornography, I prefer to call it an unlawful image. It can happen to anybody. And there are some peer-to-peer computer sites where if you say, oh, let's just say I'm interested in looking at pretty cheerleaders, they may indeed send you pictures of pretty cheerleaders who are 17 or younger. And if they're not wearing all their clothes or they're in a suggestive pose, that in fact can be determined or defined as child pornography. Next, all registrants are pedophiles. Oh my goodness, this is one of the biggest myths out there, and that term pedophile, because the fact is that a pedophile or pedophilia is a medical diagnosis and it's not a crime. Let me put it another way. Pedophilia, if you're a pedophile, you're not on the sex offender registry, nor should you be required to register as a sex offender because you are attracted to minors. But there are many people, according to research, that in fact are attracted to minors, but who never act upon it. So unfortunately, this term gets used as if somebody has in fact molested a child. So it's really important that you know that most pedophiles do not molest children. Okay, so how many people are on the California registry today? Approximately 106,000 people are on the California registry. And like, oh my gosh, that's a lot of people. Yes, it is a lot of people. And by the way, this is 106,000 people who are currently on the California registry. More than 106 people have in fact been convicted of a sex offense. And when I say convicted, by the way, it also includes people who plead guilty. Okay, so there's a broad range of conviction offenses, and please understand that because many people, when they hear the term sex offender, which I don't use, I use the term registrant instead, but many people, when they hear that somebody's been convicted of a sex offense, they think of violent rapes. Well, in fact, violent rapes are sex offenses, but so is public indecency. And if you think about it, public indecency has a very broad definition and gets a lot of people in trouble. So here's a few examples. We have people who relieve themselves on the side of a highway. Maybe it's an older man, maybe he has a prostate issue of some kind, and he just can't wait to get to a public restroom. So he pulls off on the side of Interstate 5, which is a really long highway, of course, and there's a lot of gaps there when this could happen, that he pulls off to the side. He does his best to basically conceal himself when he's relieving himself on the side of the highway. But unfortunately, sometimes we have people who are extra curious and just have to look. And then they report them to the police. So you too could end up being found guilty of public indecency for relieving yourself on the side of a highway. Now, I talked about older men. Let's talk about younger people. Probably not so many people do it now, but in my time, some people thought that it was just really necessary to basically take off all of their clothes and to go streaking. And this happened actually not that long ago, where a young man who went through his high school graduation ceremony, he decided to, once he took off the robe outside of his clothing, he just decided to keep going. In fact, he stripped naked, and then he ran across the football field where in fact the graduation ceremony had been held. Well, that young man now is in fact on the sex offender registry for public indecency. Folks, this is a warning. You too could end up on the sex offender registry for doing something that you consider to be, just fine. Okay, so let's talk about teens, because teens are actually the fastest growing part of the registry are teens who are committing sex offenses. Well, I don't know about you, but I might not have been the smartest teen. And so we have teens out there who are not so smart and who unfortunately have cell phones that have cameras on them. So we have teens who are taking pictures of themselves and some of their body parts, and then they're sending these photos to other people. So some people call it sexting, some people call it something else, but the fact is, if in fact you're a teenager and you take a picture of your body parts and you send them to another teenager, you too could end up on the sex offender registry. In fact, this is a real life situation where a 16-year-old girl took some nude selfies. So she was in her bedroom. Her parents had no idea what she was doing. She took these nude selfies and then she sent them to some other fellow high school students. Well, she's now on the sex offender registry because she created and distributed child pornography. So again, the fastest growing part of the registry in California these days are teens who are creating child pornography and who are also looking at something called child pornography because they're questioning their sexuality. Okay, so remember I said there's more than 106,000 people on the California registry. Well, nationwide, there are almost 1 million people on the sex offender registry. All right, so understand that registries are created and run by state governments. However, there are some federal laws as well that extend to registrants, and I'll be talking about those in a minute. But basically, it's the state governments. And by the way, the sex offense laws in every state are different. So every state gets to come up with their own laws, and they get to make decisions about who belongs on the registry and who doesn't. All right, so let's talk about what is a typical life of a registrant like. Well, once you're on the registry, you're going to be facing many challenges. One of them, or two of them really, are employment and housing. So why is that? Well, the fact is that when you apply for either employment or housing, one of the things that many employers and landlords require is a credit check. And when the credit check comes back, it tells the potential employer or the potential landlord, in fact, that you're currently required to register. So even in those counties and cities where people can't look at something that's 7 years old, so the fact is they can look at the current requirement to register. And in fact, that information is on people's credit reports. It's something that for the longest time I didn't know. And it took a while to crack the code here and why so many people on the registry were being denied employment and housing. And then we found out that many times the credit report stated that you were currently required to register. So when I talk about it's difficult to find housing, we currently have almost 7,000 people on the registry who are homeless. And I do mean homeless. They're living on the streets, of course, most of the time in big cities. But the fact is they're homeless. And this makes no sense. If in fact that people consider people on the registry to be dangerous, then why in the world would you want them to be living on the streets? Because guess what? They're not going to stay at the exact same location from day to day. They're going to be moving around. Makes no sense, but that's the state of affairs, unfortunately. And then also here, when it comes to employment or housing, unfortunately, it's more difficult for somebody convicted of a sex offense to find employment and housing than it is for somebody convicted of murder. I don't quite understand that, but that is how it is. But I will say, I don't think that people convicted of murder should have trouble finding employment or housing at all. What I am saying is that people here who are convicted of a sex offense should be able to find employment and should be able to find housing. Okay, so let's talk about social ramifications of being on the registry. Well, quite frankly, many people have described it, I think accurately, as social death. And what am I talking about? Well, how about if you want to date somebody? You're going on a dating app or you meet somebody at Starbucks, right? The fact is that you're young and and single and you want to date. It only makes sense, right? But when somebody looks you up these days, Googles you, if you're on the sex offender registry, it's going to come up right away. And that will cause, at the beginning of a relationship, of course, it really causes some problems because people don't know who you really are. Also, it actually affects people and ability to go to worship services. So unfortunately, there are many churches who either deny entirely anybody convicted of a sex offense or who make it extremely difficult. And what I mean by extremely difficult, at some churches, they in fact require a person on the registry to call a certain phone number once they drive into the parking lot, and then they have to wait in their car until a chaperone shows up, and then that chaperone is going to stay with them the whole time they're on the church property, including if somebody needs to go to the restroom, if somebody, I guess, needs first aid service, whatever it might be. The fact is that the person at the church is going to have a chaperone the entire time they're on the church property. And of course, we're talking about volunteer opportunities. I've been very involved in Girl Scouts in the past, including being a Girl Scout leader. And of course, they would never allow anybody who's on this registry to be a Girl Scout leader. Okay, so we're talking about registrants just in general before. So remember all those other limitations that I mentioned before. Guess what? If you're a registrant and you're on parole, the fact is you're going to have even more limitations. So how many people are currently on parole and on the registry? About 7,000. And this statistic, by the way, is from the California Department of Justice, and it's current as of about 30 days ago. So here we go. We have 7,000 people who are on parole, and their parole can last anywhere from 3 to 20 years. Can you imagine being on parole for 20 years? Oh my goodness. And you'll really wonder about that when I tell you about some of the typical conditions. So what happens if you violate parole? Guess what? You're returned to custody. It could be what they call a flash incarceration, which is usually 30 days, but it could be much longer than that, up to a year, just for violating a condition of parole. So let's talk about these parole conditions. You have to wear a GPS device on your leg 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You cannot take off this GPS device the entire time you're on parole without the permission of your parole officer. And usually in order to take it off, you have to go to the parole office and have them take it off. And it's usually because the device is not functioning properly. It's not because you want to take a bath. It's not because you want to swim in the ocean. Those things are not allowed. You're wearing your GPS device 24 hours a day and 7 days a week. And let's talk about the fact that it has to be constantly charged. And so people have to charge their GPS devices twice a day, not once a day, but twice a day. And each of those charges can take up to 1 hour. So if you think about it, there's 24 hours in a day, you're spending 22 hours. You're wearing the GPS device 24 hours, and 2 of those hours you're probably sitting right next to an outlet so you can charge your GPS device. Also, if you're on parole, it's very likely that you have a curfew. And so maybe some of you had curfews when you're a teenager. I know that I did. Well, the fact is, here you are, you're a grown person, male or female, and yet you're on curfew. And some curfews can be as early as 9 p.m., sometimes not until midnight. And then they say, and you cannot go out again until 6 o'clock in the morning, or maybe it's 8 o'clock in the morning. And sometimes that does in fact have a negative impact on employment. Another typical parole condition would be that you cannot have a camera on your cell phone, or you can't have an internet connection on your cell phone. I quite frankly don't know how anybody survives without a camera and an internet connection on their phone. Perhaps I've just gotten so used to mine. I'm taking pictures of all kinds of things so that I don't have to write them down anymore. One of my favorite things to do is if I'm traveling and I do that often at the airport, I take a picture of where I parked my car, just in case, right, to remind me of where I parked my car. But a person who's on parole will not be able to do that because, in fact, they can't have a camera they can't have a cell phone with a camera on it. Also, the whole idea about no internet connection. Again, these days, so many things happen on the internet, including just applying for a job, right? Or calling your best friend. I guess you could do that, sorry. Sending an email to your best friend. All these things, if you're on parole and you're a registrant, it's quite possible that you will be prohibited during the entire time of your parole. Remember, up to 20 years, you may not be able to have internet connection on your phone. So let's talk about contact with minors. And remember, the definition for a minor here is anybody who's 17 years or younger. Many people on the registry have families, they have children, they have nieces, they have nephews, they have cousins who might in fact be a minor. And for many people who are on parole, they are not to have contact with a minor. Also, it's ambiguous. What does it mean by no contact? I know some people who are on the registry who go and do their grocery shopping at midnight solely because they are trying to avoid having contact with minor. Now, perhaps they're being overly cautious, but again, they want to protect themselves. So they don't want to walk into Walmart at 9 o'clock in the evening because maybe there'll still be a child there. But in fact, I think at midnight, there's less chance to even observe a minor or have a minor observe them. And then in addition to these other parole conditions, continued counseling and polygraph examinations. Oh my goodness. As a lawyer, I'm really upset about the fact that people are taking polygraph exams. The courts a long time ago decided that polygraph exams are not reliable as evidence, and yet people on parole, certainly registrants on parole, are having to undergo polygraph exams. And some people don't pass them merely because they're so nervous and they get flustered, during a polygraph exam. By the way, some of the polygraphers are not kind to be, are not kind. And so that in fact increases a person's anxiety when they're taking a polygraph exam. The continued counseling doesn't sound so bad, but I will warn you that some of the people on parole who are required to undergo counseling, their counseling is not necessarily on a day of the week or a time of day that's convenient. And again, many times this conflicts with trying to hold down even a part-time job and certainly a full-time job. Okay, so let's go back to all registrants and the fact that they have travel limitations. Registrants on parole, in fact, are told that they cannot exceed a certain geographic distance away from their home. And I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about being able to go to another state. So each state, as I mentioned before, but it certainly bears repeating here, each state has unique registration requirements. And so it can range from 24 hours to 10 days. And what I mean by that is if you go visit, let's say go visit Aunt Sally in Florida, the fact is that you can only be there for 48 hours without having to register in that state too. So again, a Californian who goes to Florida, if they stay more than 48 hours, they're going to have to register in Florida and in California. And the really terrible thing about the Florida registry, one of the many terrible things about the Florida registry, is that they never take you off the registry. And therefore, even though you've only visited Florida one time and you went to Disney or wherever you went and you dutifully went in and then you registered and then you left Florida and you haven't gone back to Florida for 20 years, you're still going to be on the Florida registry. And that's going to have an impact about your overseas travel. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so let's talk about why do you need to know what the registration requirements are in each state? Because if you don't meet this requirement, you could be convicted and returned to jail or prison for failure to register. And that is one reason that some people on the registry end up returning to prison or to jail is in fact because they failed to register. And sometimes it's confusion. Sometimes even somebody's in the hospital, believe it or not, and they can't register when they're supposed to register. So I won't belabor at that point, but just understand that a failure to register is a separate conviction. It's not a sex offense, by the way, but it is a separate conviction, and it could in fact affect whether or not you can petition for removal, which I'll be talking about in a short while. Okay, so let's talk about travel overseas. That's even more difficult than traveling within the United States. For one thing, if you were convicted of a sex offense and involved a minor, again, somebody 17 or younger, and you're currently required to register, then the federal government is going to put this unique identifier on your passport. I believe that unique identifier is similar to the Scarlet Letter in Nathaniel Hawthorne's book. It's called The Scarlet Letter. There's only been 2 countries in the history of the world, by the way, who've ever added a unique identifier to their citizens' passports. One of those 2 countries was Nazi Germany. And so this makes no sense to me. Why would you want to brand your citizens who travel overseas? We'll leave the reason or questioning the reason for another day. But the fact is, again, unique identifiers are required on passports if, in fact, you've been convicted of an offense involving a minor. And by the way, this includes people who were convicted of possessing child pornography. So if you look at a photograph of a 17-year-old who is nude, you too could end up here on the sex offender registry and having this unique identifier on your passport. All right. In addition to all those other restrictions, the fact is that if you're lucky enough to be able to afford a ticket to fly to some other country, it's quite possible that you will not be allowed to enter that country. And I've listened to many people in tears talking about how they saved up money over many years so that they could travel overseas, only to find out that once they got there, they weren't allowed to enter the country. Folks, we don't make up these rules. We, the United States, supposedly, but there are many countries out there who want to do whatever the United States tells them to do, or suggests even that they do. And so at this point in time, really the continent of Asia is off limits to people on the registry. That means you cannot go visit these countries, all right, except for Hong Kong. So again, all of Asia is off limits to people on the registry except for Hong Kong. Now, there are some European countries, in fact, there are 26 European countries that do allow registrants to visit. And the 4 largest countries there are Italy, France, Germany, and Spain. So a person on the registry can go visit those states. And I'm talking about visiting, not necessarily moving there, but visiting there. But please understand, again, if you're on the registry, the ability to travel overseas is in fact limited. Okay, so let's talk about some good news. There actually is some good news, and the good news comes in the form of a tiered registry law. So I was part of this organization, the Alliance for Constitutional Sex Offense Laws, and we in fact lobbied the state legislature for almost 7 years to get a tiered registry law. Because remember what I said many slides back, that in the beginning, when you became a registrant, that in fact you were on the registry for life. Well, now there are some people, fortunately, who can in fact petition for removal after 10 or 20 years. It's not everybody on the registry, but about 45% of the people. Okay, so we've got people in tiers 1, 2, and 3. Tier 1, if you're lucky enough to be assigned to tier 1, then you can petition for removal after 10 years minimum. Tier 2, it's 20 years minimum. If you are unfortunate though and end up in tier 3, then in fact you're still going to be required to register for life. So again, the 10 years minimum or 20 years minimum, you start counting that time from the time that you're released from custody. So whether you went to jail or whether or not you went to prison, fact is when you're released from jail or prison, the clock starts counting toward the 10 or 20 years. It can be stopped though, the clock can be stopped if in fact you went back to custody for any other reason, maybe you get a DUI or something like that, then in fact the clock stops when you're in custody and then it restarts after you get out. The good part of this is the time that you were on parole or probation does in fact count toward these minimum time periods for registration. So let's just say that you were on parole for 5 years, you're in tier 1. Well, guess what? You only have to wait 5 years after parole to in fact petition for removal. Now remember, nobody gets off the registry without petitioning, and the decision about removal from the registry is made by a judge, that final decision. So I did mention that there are some registrants who are still required to register for life, about 55% of the people on the registry. And remember, we're talking about over 55,000 human beings, right? And it does include some people convicted of a misdemeanor and also people convicted of a non-violent, non-contact offense like possession of child pornography. So let's talk about the petitioning process so far under the tiered registry and what are the results? Well, so far about 5,000 petitions have been filed. But if you think about it, 5,000 petitions, didn't I just say that 45,000 people are eligible to petition? I did say that. So if you notice here, there's a lot of people who have not yet filed petitions. I think many of them are waiting to see what happens to the petitions that get filed. And I'd say there's good news to report here. So far, 3,428 petitions have been granted. Okay, that means there's 3,428 people who are no longer required to register. And of that total, 61 of them are my clients. Okay, it also, okay, so once a petition is granted, what's the benefit of that? Well, you're no longer required to register in the state of California. Unfortunately, you might have to register in another state that you visit or another state that you move to. Because remember, as I stated previously, that each state gets to develop and pass their own sex offender registration laws. And so some states say, not all states, thank goodness, but some states say, if you've ever been required to register in another state, if you move to our state, you're going to have to register, even if you're no longer required to register in the state where you're convicted. Makes no sense to me, but that's what their laws say. Okay, so of the 5,000 petitions filed, only 72 petitions have been denied. And I think that that is a good percentage right there. So it's way less than 1% of petitions have been denied. I have no idea why those petitions were denied. But they have. And then about 200 petitions have been dismissed. A petition gets dismissed when you haven't met the eligibility requirements, right? So maybe it's only been 9.5 years instead of 10 years. There's many reasons, and you're on tier 1. There are many reasons why a petition would be dismissed. Another one is that you're currently on parole or probation for another offense. If you're on parole or probation for another offense, for example, I mentioned a DUI earlier, then you have to wait until that parole or probation is over. Okay, and then we have about 1,500 petitions that are pending. And what that means is a court has not yet made a decision about the 1,500 petitions. And the reason is there's quite a lag here from the time a petition is filed. It takes about 4 months to get through the first 2 steps of the process, which are having law enforcement review your petition and deciding if you're eligible. And then the second step is the DA's office and whether or not they're going to object to your petition. So I think it's perfectly fine for people to be preparing and filing their own petitions. But I do want to warn that a person whose petition has been objected to by a DA's office, they should not represent themselves in court. Instead, they should hire an attorney. The reason is that it's a very serious hearing. It's before a judge, and it is possible that the DA's office will treat you differently if you're not a lawyer. Okay. So in conclusion, let's talk about how can you help, whether or not you're on the registry, whether or not you have a family member on the registry, or maybe you're somebody who just has an open heart and an open mind and understands that most registrants do not pose a current danger. This is how you can help. Number 1, learn the facts about registrants and the registry. I presented a lot of facts today. I hope you took notes, or you can go back and refer to this presentation again, because again, you think about the myths and then let me talk about the facts. Okay, what are the myths versus what the facts are? And if you remember nothing else, remember this one thing from the presentation, that the rate of reoffense for a person on parole is less than 1%. By the way, that statistic comes from the California Department of Corrections, their own report. So again, less than 1% of people on the registry who are on parole will commit another sex offense. What else can you do? You can share the facts you've learned with other people. And you can talk to your neighbors. You can talk to people, in your when you're at Starbucks. You can talk to other people who might go to your church. Talk to people and let them know. And even saying something, an icebreaker, did you know that? And you'll be surprised at how many people will actually listen to you. A lot of people will. And I think that once people know the facts, they will feel more comfortable with somebody who in fact is on the registry. Next, talk to somebody who is on the registry, right? People on the registry are not monsters. People on the registry are people, right? And many of them, but not all of them, have jobs. Almost all of them have families, and many of them might be able to mow your lawn or help you with, a car issue or something like that. So go ahead and talk to somebody who's on the registry, whether they're a neighbor or somebody who lives on your block, or maybe somebody who goes to your church if they're lucky enough to find a church that will allow them to attend service. The fact is that people on the registry have the same, maybe similar interests that you do. People on the registry have families, and people on the registry, you know what? They appreciate a smile just like the rest of us. Okay, what else can you do? Spread the word regarding the tiered registry law. So this new law that started in July of 2021, we only have about 5,000 people who filed petitions, 5,000 people out of 45,000 people who in fact are eligible to petition. Please, 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 if you know anybody's on the registry, if you know anybody who has a family member on the registry, please make sure they know about this tiered registry law, because it's quite possible that someone that they know, if not them, are eligible to petition for removal from the tiered registry law. And by the way that the tiered registry law got passed is because government realized that they were wasting a lot of government resources by monitoring people who don't pose a current danger. And think about that. If we're spending a lot of money as a society doing something that's not necessary, the fact is we're not spending time on other things that are necessary. And one of the things I believe that more money should be spent on, less money monitoring people who don't pose a current danger, right? More money should be spent on prevention. There are ways to prevent sexual abuse from happening. It's happened in other countries, like in Germany. The fact is that they have counselors who can talk to people who are attracted to minors, or people who are thinking about something that they should not do. And unfortunately, in the state of California right now, there's a lot of mandatory reporting that goes on. And because of that, people who might otherwise benefit from counseling don't get the counseling because they're afraid, quite frankly, of the counselors. Okay. And another bullet point here, please engage with nonprofits that support both registrants and family members. I really haven't said enough about family members and how they're impacted by the registry. So remember, there's 106,000 people on the registry. For every person on the registry, they have family members, they have friends. And if you're a family member or a friend of a registrant, you too are being impacted negatively by that. So here's some other things that you can do. Please, please, please support changes to the tiered registry law. As I mentioned earlier, and it bears repeating, there are too many offenses now that are assigned to tier 3, right? If you have 55,000 people on the registry being assigned to tier 3, that's too many people. And that's because there are too many offenses assigned to tier 3. Quite frankly, I believe that tier 3 should be limited to those who commit violent contact offenses, right? So the people, in fact, who get arrested for public indecency, oh my goodness, they don't belong on the sex offender registry at all, I don't think. And they certainly don't belong, assigned to tier 3. Okay. Also, support the reasons for the tiered registry law here. I mentioned some of them, but they bear repeating. That the tiered registry in and of itself basically allows a more efficient use of limited government resources. As I said before, people are spending lots of money, not people, but the government is spending so much money monitoring people who don't pose a current danger. One of my clients was convicted in 1979. He's still in the sex offender registry. By the way, he had a clean record before that. He's had a clean record since then. So he's been on the registry for more than 40 years, 40 years. And and I'm trying to get him off the registry at this point in time. I have filed his petition, but there's no guarantee that the judge will agree with us. He doesn't pose a current danger. He doesn't belong on the registry. And that's just one example. Again, focus on those who do in fact pose a current danger. There are some people who pose a current danger. And for those people, then they should be monitored. And by the way, I don't believe that monitoring should include in sharing this information with the public, because unfortunately the public doesn't always know what to do with the information that they see on the Megan's Law website. And I'll give you one terrible example. There it is past tense, there was a gentleman whose first name was Michael, and Michael was released from prison. And he was in prison for quite a while. And when he got out of prison, he lived in a mobile home park. And when he lived in the mobile home park, there was an event for the people who lived there. And he went to this small event. And when he was at the event, one of the other residents of that mobile home park thought that Michael looked at his son, his young son, quote, the wrong way. And that father who thought that Michael looked at his son the wrong way, killed Michael. And I mean, he murdered him in his own home, by the way, Michael's own home. So that person, that father, did not bother before he killed Michael, bother to look and figure out what it is that Michael had been convicted of. And the fact is, Michael had been convicted of sexually abusing an adult woman. So Michael was not interested in minors, and he was not interested in males. And so yet he was murdered by a father who thought Michael looked at this young man, quote, the wrong way. Thank you so much for listening to me today. Again, my name is Janice Bellucci. I am an attorney. I am also executive director of the Alliance for Constitutional Sex Offense Laws. Here is my contact information. And there is the website, www.all4solaws.org. I hope that you will contact me in the future. Thank you very much for your time.
Welcome back, and thank you to Janice for just a wealth of information. Just so many things that I wrote down in terms of more information around this registrant population, right? I think there's this stigma associated with this population. They're perceived as a threat, but when you start looking at the actual data, you realize that this population has very low recidivism, reoffense rates. So the reoffense rates are less than 1% for those that are on parole. And some of these individuals have parole for a very long time, right? Up to 20, 23 years. And then you look at the reoffense rates, and it's 5% for the population in general. When you look at the recidivism rate, though, those, as Janice mentioned, these individuals have a lot of restrictions that are associated to them. And so when you look at the recidivism rate, that's where you start to get some of those numbers that are used to scare the general population. But know that that recidivism rate really has to do with those restrictions. If someone has a curfew that they miss, that's a violation. If someone has their GPS monitor that falls under a certain percentage of charge, that's a violation. If someone doesn't register with their local law enforcement within a few days of their birthday, that's a violation. And there's so many more restrictions that this population has that's where the recidivism rate comes in. And we also saw that in research as well. Some of the research pointed to the fact that this recidivism rate is often used to portray this population as something worse or something of a population that just continues to reoffend. So we want to make sure that we share the actual data, the truth here, the facts, and the fact of the matter is this population has a very low reoffense rate in general, right? 5% or so. So thank you again for Janice for that amazing information. This recording is going to be on the Friends Outside website. If you want to reference it later on, we'll also send a follow-up email so that you can get all the information that Janice shared. But please continue to use this recording when it's published to share with your staff and share with others who want to learn more about this population. Next, we're going to move forward, and I'm going to invite my colleague, Maya Denola, who's a licensed social worker, who's going to be doing a registrant panel. So you heard some of the data. Now we wanted to share with you the experiences of individuals who are living this experience, right? Who are going to the day-to-day and experiencing these restrictions, experiencing this stigma, experiencing life as a registrant. So one of the things, important notes to take is that because of the sensitivity of this work and because of safety issues, as Janice mentioned, we've opted to blur the faces of our panelists, just as an abundance of caution. You know, some of our panelists, their employers know about their records, but maybe their coworkers might not, or maybe someone in the community might see this and recognize them. And as Janice mentioned, right, there has been issues of violence against this population because, and so we just want to make sure that we are mindful of everyone's safety. So again, thank you to Maya and our registrant panel, and we'll see you right after the panel. Thank you.
All right, thank you, everybody. So let's dive right in. My first question for the panel is around resources. And I would love to hear from each of you what resources are really missing in your reentry. And then if there was any particular resource that was especially helpful or anything that was really, really missing. So, right, what's missing, what's really helpful in terms of resources, and resources can be defined as anything. So Jay, do you want to start us off?
Yes. The resources I would start off that is missing, I would say is with housing to assist you to find jobs, but they're not case specific. They're not registrant specific. So you take US jobs, core, whatever. I don't want to put nobody on blast, but you take our resource center and they'll sit there and send you 50 different applications to fill out, but then out of the 50, they're going to get shot down because you're registering as soon as your name pops. So I brought this up to one of my caseworkers from a resource center, and I says, well, look, I'm a registrant, so this has to become an issue when you're looking for employment for me. She said, oh, yes, no problem. I'll add that to your file. Well, I never heard from them again. So that is a very big resource that we need out here to find employment, because without employment, you really can't survive out here unless you resort back to your old ways. To me, that's a big one that's missing. A resource that I partook in is transitional. You know, transitional. I'm a part of 2 different transitional housing programs, and I work for them because they see the gap in employment, and they gave me an opportunity for who I am today, not for who I was back then or for what I was convicted of. So I was blessed, and I received not only housing, but also received employment at those 2 transitional housings. So transitions for us is huge. The same problem is that most of the registrants, they end up staying in transition longer because there's no place to go, because the housing is not sufficient.
Understood. Thank you so much, Jay, for sharing that.
Not a
Leo,
problem.
anything you'd like to add?
I was raised in Texas. When my dad got sick, I did an interstate compact, and I come to a whole new state. I had to learn California. I had to learn this. I had to learn how to go here. I had to learn what was this and that. So I had to be persistent and do everything myself. You know, as far as with the barriers with resources, there is none. There is none for no registrants. You can take a man who shot down 4 kids out of school or did anything like that. It's a whole different. They can get a job before me. All they see is when they do that background check, and if they see that you are registered, they see that you got a 290 crime, you're not getting past that.
Thank you, Leo. I'm really curious if Katie, if your experience fits with the experience that Jay and Leo have had in terms of resources. What do you think?
Yeah, Maya, thank you. I can't recall being given any resources, to be honest with you. I think perhaps there was some sort of a packet that I got in a class in prison that was geared towards employment. I think the class was like an office skills class where you learned how to make a resume, and they gave you like sort of a job resources or how to interview, that type of thing. It wasn't skills that I didn't already know. So yeah, if I look back on it, to be honest with you, I think I sort of scrambled around looking for my own.
So it sounds like you had a very similar experience of having
Mhm,
to go it alone.
for sure.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you so much for your honesty. And so this question kind of dovetails with what we're talking about. And Jay, we'll start again with you. But in terms of that, how can nonprofits and social service organizations help you? And this is, help you as a person and really specifically help you as somebody with a registration requirement. What can nonprofits and social services do, in your opinion?
Thank you. Employment. To me, the biggest thing is employment, because the key is employment. With employment, I'll be able to help myself. And then also with employment comes housing. But you can find housing, but it's just hard to find, and it's not in the area that you need it to be in. So that's the catch-22 for me. Everybody's not the same, and I understand that. But I know if I have a good job, then I'll be able to find housing, even if you have to do. I've had people tell me, well, all you have to do is have a friend rent the place for you, and then you move in. So basically, you're telling me to break the law just so I can find proper housing. So I'm a registrant without all the restrictions. I don't have the no school, the no parks, the no beaches, none of that. But at the same time, when I try to rent this apartment, and she says, well, we do a light background check. I'm like, what does that entail? She says, as long as you're not a mass murderer or a child molester, you're good. So I asked the landlord, I said, well, what's the difference? I mean, if something pops on the registry list, you can't tell them apart, okay, unless you sit there and you go on Megan's Law, which is illegal, to view that type of thing for an apartment application. So I went back and forth with this manager, and I says, you can't just put everybody in the same boat. Okay. She's like, well, I got families and kids here, so I gotta confront for them. But yet you'll sit there and let somebody who, like the gentleman just said, that somebody who killed the whole family, you'll let them live in an apartment full of families. But yet here I am, I got convicted of a crime over 23 years ago, and you're saying I can't move in with you because of, and she just paused because she couldn't say nothing. She just paused. So as far as the resources from nonprofits, employment, like I said, I work with 2 nonprofits now, and they do good with like training people and teaching them giving them life skills, how to use a computer, how to do a resume, but all that is hollow if you can't find work. So I have a stellar resume, I have an education, I have multiple degrees, and I still can't find a job because every time they do a background check, the first thing that pops up is I'm a registrant. So now dealing
Jay,
with.
what would you ask? Yeah, what would you ask of a nonprofit or a social service agency to do? If you could ask.
Find me a living wage job.
Copy that. Leo, what do you think? If you could ask nonprofits and social services, what would you ask them to do to help you?
I want y'all to understand this. A lot of people also, and this is including me when I say this, I was falsely convicted. It was a lie. It was a lie. So I'm still in my mind, I know that this costs a lot of money to get a lawyer and file a post-conviction writ of habeas corpus for DNA testing. So my thing is this, I would ask the nonprofits, it's time to go to some colleges, man, and try to grab some college lawyers, some college kids, some college young men and women to represent us in court for those who want to seek that avenue. We need all avenues. We need lawyers to talk for us and to go where we can't go. We need to talk to the government about. We need to talk to the government about filing DNA tests and having that type of. I'm talking about for any state in the United States. Anybody who wants to. It's too hard. It's too hard to prove your innocence nowadays. You got to go through jump through over so many hurdles. I'm thinking I'm Carl Lewis just to prove my innocence, you know? So I'm like this.
So Leo, if you had an ask, your ask would be to have nonprofits provide more access to legal services. Is that what I'm hearing?
We need lawyers. We need lawyers because that's the only thing that's going to get things done the right way and make it, solidify it and change it.
Katie, if you could ask a nonprofit or social service agency, what is the ask? As a person with a registrant requirement?
For me, I feel like it would behoove this population if the social services or the nonprofit sector had a subdivision for registrants. So I know there's nonprofits that assist with felons, reentry programs, but there's nothing specifically targeted to our population. And so because we sort of fall outside of the box from regular felons, because the crime is so significant as far as the repercussions go, and the stigma. If we could have folks who were working within the nonprofit and the social services who were trained on this sensitive subject and trained in the different opportunities that they could provide for us, I think it would help, and it would help us to be able to feel comfortable to go to those programs without feeling stigmatized and having to say, like, you can go into a social service program and say, I'm a felon. I mean, everybody knows somebody who's committed a crime, somebody in your family, probably somewhere. Just statistics alone show that. However, as far as being a registrant, being on Megan's list, it's a whole different thing.
Thank you so much for illustrating that. I'm going to pivot a little bit and ask you about a different kind of support. And again, Jay, I'd like to start with you. Curious to hear, what does family support look like for you in your reentry journey?
Okay, for me, family support was the key. They're the ones that gave me the leg up because they knew who I was, not who that paper says I am. So to me, family support was huge. And that's what gave me the leg up when I re-entered into society.
Beautiful. Thank you, Jay. Leo, I know you're not from here, but I'm wondering if family support is playing a part in your reentry journey.
I'm originally born here, but family support is in bad shape for me. My mom just died 7 months ago. My dad died in 2018, and
so sorry to hear that.
So it's to see, my life. This has just destroyed my life from start to finish. I mean, people's died. Time I've been locked up, so many people have died that I really loved and really had support. My brother was killed a year before I got out. It's just you don't understand it. You don't understand how hard it is to have a hard heart, to be with sadness and all these different emotions. It's so many things that's locked up inside of me that hurt so bad. You know what I'm saying? It's just you would not begin to understand how this hurts so bad. And family, they people don't tend to understand that. So family support is not really on my side. It's like I'm all alone, and God is only I give all praise to God. That has been my strength and my crutch.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Leo. I'm really sorry to hear of all the loss in your life, but I appreciate you bringing that here today. With that being said, Katie, what does family support look like for you?
Thank you. I actually feel like family was critical for me. I was blessed to have my family take care of my children. And that allowed them to not have to go into any sort of, foster care or what have you. So when I got home, I was able to stay with my family, and they supported me financially until I was able to do so myself. So honestly, I cannot imagine anybody having to come out without family. I don't see how anybody can do it, to be honest with you.
Mm.
It's the emotional aspect is, I I feel for Leo for sure. And I thank him for his sincerity and honesty.
Powerful. Emotional supportive family. Thank you, Katie. You know, as Leo mentioned, right, a lot happens when you're incarcerated. And I'm wondering, in those final weeks, months, when you knew that you were coming home, you had your day, were there any services that you really wished would have been provided to you while you were still incarcerated that may have helped you in planning better on this reentry journey? And Jay, we'll start with you again.
Realistically, just housing and employment. I mean, that's the only thing that I really struggle with to this day. Knowing that I was coming home, I took care of mostly all my stuff as far as birth certificates and driver's license and all that type of things like that. Transit, transportation. You know, like I said, I was blessed to have family in my corner when I came home. But as far as services, I couldn't think of nothing different besides just employment and housing services. Like I spoke to earlier, there's nothing that's for our population, you know, and everything against our population. You know, look at all the laws and tell me if there's one law out there that helps registrants.
Yeah, I hear you. Well, hopefully these conversations can lead to some changes and improving some of these things. Leo, how about you? Was there anything that, knowing what you know now about how difficult reentry has been for you, that you think had you been provided in those last months or weeks before leaving prison that would have been helpful?
You know, like the gentleman was saying, I mean, they never I wish they would. I'm not the type of person, I don't want to be, you know, I just want to live, man. I want to live free, you know. I want to be free. I don't want to live, oh, you gotta, if you want to stay, if you want housing, you gotta stay with nothing but registrants in a certain area. That's more of a that's more of a mark. You're more accessible. You're more, people will know where you're at regardless. You know what I'm saying? It's very dangerous to have one people in one certain area, and if the police are gonna be. You don't understand police when they pull you up, when they pull me over, when I've been pulled over, and they look up my name, man. You ought to see how they treat me, man. This police, about a year ago, I got pulled over. I'm just gonna refer, the man just threw me all over the hood for nothing, for no reason at all. Just because he seen that I was 290 and that I was in the area. And I was coming from work. I was coming from work.
No, I hear you. Thank you for that insight. Katie, I'm wondering if on your end, there was anything different.
I wish there would have been more transparency in the things that I had to do. Like I had to wear the monitor for 2 years, I believe, the ankle monitor. I didn't know that. I don't even think that I knew what the registry was. Again, I think it's a disservice because you should know before, because if you're coming home to family, children, I mean, you should be able to plan your life. You know, it's supposed to be a fresh start, but it's really not, because you're not given I wasn't given any tools, any assistance, anything. I didn't know anything until I went to the parole office.
So it sounds like for you as well, being given some education, for lack of a better word, on what it would really be like once you got out would have been really helpful in making some decisions
For
about
sure.
how to plan.
Agree.
Well, thank you. Thank you all for that. Kind of in the same vein, but a little bit different. When you think about the way you've been treated thus far on this reentry journey, has there been anyone, an individual, an organization, a government arm, anyone that actually treated you in a way that was particularly helpful? Jay, what's your experience been like?
Just my transition. The two places I work with, they're helpful because they treated me with understanding. They treated me like I was normal, that I was a human, and that helped me thrive. Because at first, when they put this dog collar on my ankle, I thought that it was like me walking around with a sticker on my forehead, and so that kind of like left me secluded and closed in. And they opened me up a little bit and helped me go out to the world and find my way. So that was a benefit to me. But as far as like government organizations, absolutely nothing.
Well, I'm really happy to hear that someone did treat you exactly as you are as a human and offered you that dignity, and that was helpful to you in your journey. Leo, what about you? When you think about the way you've been treated since you've come home, has there been anyone at all who's treated you in a way that was helpful?
I mean, like I said, I had to be proactive. I'm proactive on finding ways through cracks and crevices. I was able to by sure I think it was God's will. I was at group, and this individual was talking about friends outside, and they had a P2P program, and they helped me obtain a certificate through work readiness. They helped me. They gave me resources to Pierce College, and I was able to obtain my custodial technician college certificate. In fact, I just did that last month. But it took that long. I've been here since 2018. It just took that long for me to find that. And so, I think, friends outside, but that's really the only organization here in California, in LA, that allowed me to thrive. And they helped me, find different ways to find jobs. But other than that, as far as with, would you say, what was the other question about government?
No, it's just generally, and I think you've answered it, Leo, and I'm glad to hear that there was at least someone that did treat you in a way that was helpful. So it sounds like Friends Outside as an organization was able to meet you and your needs and provide you with something that helped you in your reentry journey. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. Katie?
I'm actually going to go against the grid and say that my parole officer actually was very nice. She was a woman. She treated me with a lot of dignity. She didn't give me any breaks. She was kind of a salty dog type older lady. But I found that she was very kind to me. And it just might have been a gender thing. I don't know. And also, I feel like the officer in charge where I register for the first 7 or 8 years, she was a woman, and she was polite. I can't say she was kind in any way, shape, or form, but she didn't treat me like a pariah. Whereas when I went in there and it would be a man that was working, I did feel like sort of like humiliated. But for sure, the two women that were originally helping me transition were very, very kind to me.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I appreciate your going against the grain. I think it illustrates that right? Nothing is a monolith. Not everybody on the registrant is the same person, and not everybody at the parole or probation or even police department is the same person, and that kindness can go a long way. So I really appreciate you sharing that experience, Katie.
Thank you.
Okay. And so as we've kind of been hearing, right, there's really this lack of resources. And I'm also hearing that employment is a huge piece here. So with that, what do you believe is preventing you from achieving your ideal career or job placement now that you've come home?
The registrant list.
Can you
100%.
elaborate a little bit, Jay?
Well, they do background checks and that pops up and they rescind the offer. I interview well. I have the background. I have an education. There's a lot of people out here that want to hire me until they run my name and see then it's about insurance purposes. At least this is what they tell me. So it's the registered list. If employers were not allowed, in California, they got a thing called ban the box, where they can't legally ask you if you've ever been convicted of a crime. So then that goes 7 years. So as long as I haven't been convicted of a crime for 7 years, it's going to come back clean, unless you're on the registered list. If you're on the registered list, regardless of what happens, that's going to pop up. So if I can say I haven't committed a crime in 30 years, they do a background check, registered list pops up, boom, they cancel my job position. So if I kill 20 people and I do 20 years in prison, I get out, they do a background check, my record's clean. That's a loophole. I mean, that's my biggest problem for finding employment is the registered list. Not my criminal background, but the fact that the registered list pops up on a simple background check. I can understand a life scan when you're dealing with sensitive populations. That I can understand. But a basic criminal check, when my crime was committed over 25 years ago, that should not pop up. Because if I kill somebody 8 years ago, that doesn't pop up.
Right, you're saying the registry itself is the issue that's preventing you from getting the
Correct.
career of your dreams.
Correct.
Understand. Yeah, I hear you. Leo, what about you? What would you say is the biggest barrier to you achieving the career of your dreams?
I mean, the whole law they got attached on the registry list. You got to be on this. You got to be on this forever. Something they got to think. You understand what that means? Forever, lifetime. You can be a 70-year-old man, but you still gotta. You committed this crime. You live that long. For God bless me to live that. You can be an 80-year-old man, and you still have to register.
Thank you, Leo. Katie, what about you?
I would definitely say that it's the registry aspect. For me, my background is in social services. And so any criminal, I mean, it would be really any felony would prohibit me from working in the field that I work in. And with that being said, I mean, I've also always wanted to work within criminal justice and, race relations and the disparity of people of color in prison and, just working through anything to do with social justice, but I can't. So, I mean, there are a lot of jobs in nonprofit that say that they welcome you if you have a felony background because you're, more understanding, you understand the population, etc. But I feel like I've been shut down when it comes to my particular felony because of the registry aspect, because you can't be hired when you're working with people if you're, have a sex crime, no matter what kind it is. So for me, that's been my biggest barrier. So I've been employed, thank God, with the same place for 11 years. But I always keep an eye out for something else, as I get older to do what I've educated to do. But there's definitely hasn't been any doors that have opened.
Yeah, I imagine that's heartbreaking. It sounds like you're echoing Jay's experience in many ways, where the registry is getting in the way of all the skills that you have. Yeah,
For sure.
thank you for sharing that. With that, I wanted to ask our panel about, I guess you could look at this as the, right, the R in the CDCR, the rehabilitation piece, right? If you think about rehabilitative services, if you think about treatment services, if you think in terms of healing, are there any such services beyond the mandated programs for treatment while you are on parole that you are receiving or that you feel would be helpful for you to have access to while you take this journey back into society? Hope that question makes sense. So additional services along the lines of rehabilitation and healing beyond what's mandated that you think would be helpful or that you would like to see, if any. Jay, you want to try to tackle that for us?
Okay, I can tackle it pretty quickly with just therapy. I mean, like a lot of times, you know, we get in these situations with being from our background and we don't have the right resources to reach out to proper therapy. I'm not talking about the state mandated clinicians. I'm talking about righteous therapy.
Can you elaborate for me a little bit? What's the difference between state mandated clinicians and righteous therapy?
Okay, so mandated therapy is you have to be cautious about what you say to your clinician because they report back to your parole officer. So mandated therapy, you know, you have that disconnect where righteous therapy is you can go to talk to somebody and open up and talk to them about anything. You don't have to worry about no parole officers sneaking in. And you know, mandated therapy, they write reports that go directly to the BPH that goes to Sacramento, and then that's going to affect you get off parole or not. You know, mandated therapy, they got lie detector tests and everything else that's attached to it, where then on therapy you don't have that.
I like that. I might have to adapt your term, Jay, righteous therapy. So it sounds like that is an important aspect that you'd like to see more of to help people with their reentry journey. Katie, do you want to input on this question?
So I did have to go to the mandated counseling sessions. I think I had to go once a week, maybe for the first year, and then every other week for the second year, if I'm recalling. I didn't feel comfortable. I was always scared that anything I said was going in some kind of report somewhere. Like I wanted to utilize that and I wanted to be better and work through issues and take advantage of, the therapy. But I didn't understand why I was doing it. And so I was just scared the whole time to say anything. But I am in therapy now just because I have severe PTSD and anxiety from what happened to me with being arrested and being on parole and from being on the registry. And so I have my insurance plan where I do therapy once a week. And so for me, it's helped me tremendously with working through my emotions and just the fear that I have of being in public and the police and, people finding out my status.
Thank you so much, Katie. I so appreciate you being willing to be honest about that. And I'm really, really glad that you found something that works for you. So it sounds like more therapy for everybody is what I'm hearing.
Yeah, I mean, it may not work for others, but it has definitely helped me.
So our last question for this evening panel, and this is really a bigger kind of question. If you could say to the larger society, right, what could larger society do to support successful reentry and healing? This doesn't just have to be for people with registration requirements. Of course, that is an experience that you have and can speak to, but what can society do to really help people be successful in healing from their experiences and re-entering and rejoining free society? Jay?
Just off the top is stop judging us for our past actions and let our rehabilitation. I mean, like for me, being a lifer, I had to go through BPH. So clinicians and doctors had to see it fit to re-enter into society. So that I should now not have to come out to society and prove to my neighbors. I've already done that. It's taken me 20 plus years. There's people out here in society that don't have the reprogramming that I do. So that's what makes me stand apart out here, is because I've been in tune with self. I know about my emotions and my triggers and my lived experience and everything that I've had to deal with for society, where they don't out here. So they're out here still sleeping. So to me, the biggest thing would be like, if I do the time, I should not have to live my crime over and over again.
That's powerful.
And I thank you guys for this opportunity.
100%. Leo, what would you say to larger society? You could give larger society advice on successful reentry. How can we be supportive?
Since people always want to look at statistics and look at numbers, well, look at the numbers of this particular crime. Like a 4% recidivism rate. It's not happening every day. It's not happening every month. It's not happening frequently. Recidivism, reoffending for the same crime. It's not regular. People need to understand that. When you look in the mirror at yourself before you judge somebody else, act like you better. Act like you ain't never been in no trouble. People change. That's what people need to understand. People change. People do change. Some people change. You want to go after somebody, go after the ones who are reoffended. Wait for that. You're gonna be waiting. Because people change. Everybody deserves a chance. Everybody deserves a chance. That's all I gotta say about it. People ain't looking at it like that. I'm done with that, Sam. Talking about that. I like to, before I leave, I like to thank y'all for giving me this opportunity to meet people.
So Leo, let's give Katie a moment to also respond to the question, and then we can close out.
Well, yeah, I feel society should educate themselves on the specific laws surrounding registrants. To me, I feel like that we as a society do make changes when it comes to laws with our votes. So that if you were to read these laws and really see how ridiculous a lot of them are, and not be in fear or fearmonger, then the more educated you are, I feel like the better chance we have to have these laws reevaluated. So I just feel like education is key. Read those ballots when they come your way, read through these things. I know I've, read through so many things and, back beginning with Megan's Law and with the history of it and what have you. And so, yeah, I just feel like education is key for society. And truthfully too, is just, understanding people, understanding what your neighbors are going through. You don't know what somebody's going on until you ask.
Thank you. I agree. Education is key. Thank you for sharing that. And so, panel, thank you so much for your time. I want to give you each a quick opportunity if you have any last thoughts, closing thoughts, anything you'd like to add before we log off for today. And again, just thank you so much for your time and for being brave and offering up your very personal experiences for others to learn from. As Katie said, education is key. So I really, really appreciate the time, the honesty, and the bravery. And with that, Jay, any final thoughts? Anything you'd like to add before we go?
I just want to say thank you guys again for this opportunity, and I look forward to seeing what the next panel is going to bring.
Thank you, Leo.
I'd just like to say, I thank God for blessing us with y'all. Somebody's listening. I just hope y'all can help us find a way to break down the barriers. That's all. Just thank you.
Amen. Thank you, Leo. Miss Katie, you bring us home.
Yes, I just want to thank you guys so much for picking such a diverse panel. You're really showcasing, again, the different variations of the registry. I think that's smart. And again, I just thank you for the opportunity to be here today. And thank you for the work that you're doing.
Thank you all. We really appreciate it once again. I do hope that we can continue to have these open conversations in this format and other format with people everywhere, and, you know, really bring in some of this change that clearly is so very, very needed. And so I really want to wish each and every one of you all the best of luck on this journey that you're on. And I really look forward to crossing paths again sometime soon.
Thank you so much to Maya, to Jay, Leo, and Katie for your amazing testimony. There's just so much that we, hopefully all of us here, learned by the experiences of these individuals. As you'll see in our research presentation on Thursday, we were able to interview 41 individuals for this project, and there's just so much more information that we have to share about the unique experience of the individuals, especially those that are going through the America's Job Center system. And so we definitely invite you back for day 2. But again, thank you to the panelists. Thank you to Janice Bellucci, to the state, to Mary for the vision in this work. It's important. And so we hope that you took a lot from today. Just a quick reminder that, you know, there's still the Q&A box there. If you have any questions, please let us know. We'll be answering those questions in a future email. There will also be an email that goes out today for all of you that registered. There was a questionnaire that you took, 10 questions, right? Testing your knowledge around this population. We're going to go ahead and resend those questions out to you to see if you picked up any of those additional answers. So please be on the lookout for that email. And also the summit on day 2 on Thursday, there is a registration link for that as well. No more questions, but there is a registration link so that we can send you that link for Thursday. So in the email, you'll get also that registration link. If you want to go ahead and register already, we'll go ahead and post the registration link now, so you have that available and you can register now. If not, be on the lookout for that email, or if you want to go to your confirmation email that you received for this summit, you'll also see the link there. Just copy and paste it into your browser. So again, on behalf of the team here, Friends Outside, and all the facilitators, the panelists, just thank you so much for engaging with us today, for taking your time to learn about our registrant population. And hopefully you picked up some really good information that can continue to open your knowledge around this particular population, that you can share that knowledge with your colleagues, and that we can continue to improve outcomes for individuals with sex offenses. So we look forward to seeing you on Thursday. And we will be going over our research findings, and we're also going to have a presentation on restorative justice, right? Restorative justice is, what does it take to heal after for those that have experienced crime, experienced harm, as well as those that have caused harm. How do we bring those communities together and move forward in healing? And so we look forward to discussing that topic with you all on Thursday. Just incredible work going on in that space, and we're really looking forward to hearing from our partners, AHIMSA, and some of the individuals that have gone through that programming. So we look forward to seeing you. Thank you all again for attending, and have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.